let's unpack this. Imagine a nation born from immense sacrifice, brimming with this real promise of democracy and freedom. But then almost overnight, it feels like a swift and brutal crackdown just changes everything. It silences the very voices that had once shaped the foundation of that nation. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the intricate story of Eritrea. We're focusing on a pivotal, really tragic moment in its history, and the fate of one man who embodied its early hope and later, well, its profound betrayal, Mahmoud Ahmed Sherifo.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how the diverse sources we've compiled. I mean, we've got everything from rigorous human rights reports by global bodies to these deeply personal accounts, including one from Sherifo's own son. They paint such a vivid, comprehensive picture of this really dramatic transformation. Our mission today is to distill the most crucial insights, helping you understand not just what happened, but why it matters and the systemic forces, the things really at play in this complex situation.
Right, so let's start with Mahmoud Ahmed Sherifo himself.
Yeah.
His name is just central to this whole narrative, appearing again and again across these sources as a figure of, well, immense importance. Before the crackdown, what defined his journey? What were his contributions to Eritrea?
Well, Mahmoud Sherifo was far more than just a political figure. He was really an architect of independent Eritrea, both on the battlefield and, intellectually. He actually left his schooling back in 1966 to join the Eritrean Liberation Front, the ELF, and later became a founding father of the EPLF, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, which, as you know, ultimately spearheaded the independence struggle. Our sources, including a really poignant account from his comrade Ahmed al-Kaisi, describe him as a prolific reader, a deep thinker, and a fighter who meticulously monitored current affairs. He was apparently fluent in Arabic, Tigrinya, Saho, and English, which made him a crucial communicator.
So clearly a person of profound intellect, and that sounds like a unifying force, even during the tough times of the armed struggle. How did that translate into his role after independence?
Precisely. After Eritrea gained independence in 1991, Sherifo transitioned, seemingly quite seamlessly, into significant government roles. He served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, then Minister of Local Government, and by 1994, he was elected to both the powerful Central Committee and the Eritrean National Council. But his commitment to democracy wasn't just theoretical, It was actionable. He actually chaired the committee responsible for drafting Eritrea's proposed electoral law. That was a critical step towards setting up a multi-party system, which makes what happened next even more impactful, really.
Okay, and what were those actions, the ones that ultimately put him on this collision course with President Afwerki?
His dedication to a democratic future was, well, it seems unwavering. In February 2001, he made a really definitive move, one that basically sealed his fate. He defied President Isaias Afwerki directly. He distributed a draft law that would have explicitly permitted multi-party elections.
Wow.
Yeah, this was a clear, very public challenge to the president's consolidation of power. It signaled his unshakable belief in the constitutional path.
And this is where Eritrea's post-independence story takes that truly chilling turn. The sources all seem to pinpoint September 2001 as this pivotal moment of profound change. It led to the mass imprisonment of critics, activists, journalists. Can you walk us through what triggered this crackdown, especially involving this group called the G15?
Right. That month marked a definitive break from any semblance of democratic transition. The G15, or the Group of 15, they weren't just random dissidents, you see. They were a critical mass of high-level government officials, ministers, even generals. Many of them were veterans alongside Afwerki himself in that long 24-year war for independence. Their crime, as the sources clearly indicate, was advocating for the implementation of Eritrea's ratified 1997 constitution.
Right, ratified, that's key.
Exactly. A constitution designed to guarantee civil rights and limit executive power, but one that had just never been brought into force.
The fact that Eritrea ratified its constitution but never implemented it is just crucial, isn't it? It means the legal framework for democracy exists on paper, but the government actively chooses to operate outside its own supreme law. It effectively nullifies the very foundation of legitimate governance. So the G15 were just calling for what was already law.
Exactly right. They weren't asking for new laws. They were asking the president to adhere to the existing ratified constitution. They called for peaceful, democratic dialogue and for convening the Provisional National Assembly and the ruling party's Central Council, things the president continuously refused to do. They specifically criticized his illegal and unconstitutional measures and the creation of the secretive special court that jailed people without any proper judicial process. Mahmoud Ahmed Sherifo was, of course, one of these prominent G15 leaders, and his wife, Astor Fissahashian, also a veteran fighter, was arrested right alongside him on September 18, 2001.
So these were not just random critics, but deeply established figures, integral to the nation's founding. It makes their actions and the president's reaction even more, well, surprising in a way. Was there any hint in the sources about why Afwerki, a leader who himself fought for liberation, was so unwilling to engage in the very democratic dialogue his former comrades were pushing for?
Well, the sources consistently highlight this pattern of increasing authoritarianism, a profound unwillingness to share power or tolerate any dissent, really, regardless of the individual's history or contributions to the liberation struggle. Afwerki's government increasingly viewed any independent voices, even those from within his own inner circle, as basically an existential threat to his absolute control. The crackdown was swift. In September 2001, security agents just rounded up Mahmoud Sherifo, other G15 members, and independent journalists. And none of them were ever formally charged or brought to trial. They simply vanished into secret detention. It's a practice that really epitomizes the regime's approach to dissent.
And what do we actually know about the grim reality of their detention, their incommunicado detention? It sounds like they just disappeared into a black hole.
They certainly did. We largely know about their conditions through these harrowing accounts from defectors, most notably Eyob Bata, who was a former prison guard. He escaped in 2010. His testimony gives us this chilling picture. Initially, prisoners like Sherifo were held in Mbatkala prison, a former training center. Conditions there were comparatively better, though still incredibly harsh. They were handcuffed 24/7 even there. But then came the transfer to Ero, a purpose-built, high-security prison strategically located in this remote, extremely hot lowland area.
Ero. And what was that like? What kind of conditions did it impose on these people, these former heroes of the liberation?
Ero was designed to break spirits. Prisoners were kept in small, confined cells, typically just 3 by 4 meters. Only a mat and a blanket, absolutely no beds. They were held 24 hours a day, often losing their sense of day or night. Cell doors only open for meager meals. Washing was a luxury allowed only once a week. They remained handcuffed constantly, 24/7, with the cuffs switched from front to back, inflicting severe, continuous pain.
Unbelievable.
And in a chilling move to further dehumanize them, and also to prevent guards from knowing their actual identities, prisoners were referred to only by numbers, not names. Food was meager, unchanging. Basic bread and lentil or chickpea soup, completely inadequate for any medical needs. Medical attention, virtually non-existent. Only 2 permanent nurses for all the prisoners and no access to higher medical services at all. And the location itself, chosen specifically to isolate and hide prisoners from the public, was characterized by extreme heat. Survival was incredibly difficult without proper ventilation. These brutal conditions weren't just, random acts of cruelty. The sources suggest they were a calculated strategy to systematically strip individuals of their identity, break their spirit, and ensure these prominent figures, once symbols of hope, could never again pose a unified threat.
That paints a truly inhumane picture. Given these unimaginable conditions, what became of Mahmoud Sherifo and the others?
The outcome is, well, tragically predictable and deeply heartbreaking. The sources confirm that at least 15 of the original 35 prominent prisoners, that includes G15 members and journalists, died in captivity. The former prison guard, Eyob Bata, reported that Mahmoud Ahmed Sherifo himself died in 2003. Tragically, due to a lack of proper medical attention for a severe bowel sickness, his body, like those of so many others who perished in detention, was taken away during the night. Their burial locations remain unknown to their families even today.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. Other prominent figures who perished include the journalist Fesahe Joshua Yohannes. He committed suicide, hanging himself with blanket strings. And General Okbe Abraha, who died in 2002 after a suicide attempt and also from asthma. Others, like Salah Kekia, Mamoun's wife Aster Fisahakshan, and Yusuf Muhammad Ali, died within days of arriving at Ero, just due to the extreme heat and brutal conditions. And those who survived, like Minister Hale Waldatense, who was reported blind, are often left physically or mentally incapacitated. The ultimate fate for many was either death or just a shattered existence.
Mahmoud Sherifo's tragic end wasn't an isolated incident then. It was, in fact, the ultimate manifestation of the very autocratic tendencies he and the G15 had warned against. His fate underscores this much broader, systemic dismantling of the rule of law across Eritrea. Now let's delve into that a bit more. What does this situation tell us about Eritrea's broader human rights crisis and its, well, totalitarian government structure?
This tragic narrative is undeniably indicative of Eritrea's broader human rights crisis, one deeply rooted in its totalitarian government structure. The sources describe Eritrea as a single-party presidential republic under President Isaias Afwerki. And here's the stark reality. No general elections had ever been held in Eritrea since its independence in 1993. The 1997 constitution, the one meant to guarantee civil rights and limit executive power, never implemented. Never. The National Assembly last met way back in January 2002. That leaves the president ruling effectively by decree, completely without legislative or constitutional restrictions. This has led to a systematic subversion of government and party institutions, consolidating all power, really, in one man's hands.
And the judiciary, the
Yeah.
supposed guardian of law and order, what happened there?
Well, the court system, according to reports, basically lost its independence in the summer of 2001 and has been ignored since. There's no independent judicial system, period. Instead, you have this special court staffed by military officers who lack any formal legal training. It operates in complete secrecy. There are no published records of its proceedings. Defendants are denied legal representation, and there's absolutely no right to appeal.
So judges aren't even bound by laws.
No, incredibly, these judges are not bound by legal codes, but by their conscience and political values, which means they can reopen cases or intensify punishments without any limits whatsoever. And beyond this shocking lack of legal process, fundamental freedoms are severely suppressed. All privately owned print media were shut down in September 2001. That effectively created a state monopoly on information. Independent civil society institutions are forbidden. Only 4 religious denominations are recognized, and if you adhere to others, you face imprisonment and torture. There are also severe controls on movement, shoot-to-kill orders for those attempting to flee the country, an indefinite national service requirement that often lasts a decade or more, involving forced labor. And to ensure compliance, the regime employs collective punishment, things like heavy fines, imprisonment, or property confiscation for the families of those who try to evade service.
Wow. That paints a truly stark picture of systemic control, operating entirely outside any recognizable legal framework or human rights standards. How has the international community responded to such pervasive abuses?
The international community has responded with increasing marginalization and condemnation, though, the impact on the ground has been limited. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights, for instance, that's the continent's primary human rights body, so its findings carry significant regional weight. It has twice found Eritrea in violation of human rights, specifically calling for the immediate release of the G15 and the journalists. Similarly, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention concluded Eritrea violated human rights concerning the G15, finding they were imprisoned solely for expressing political opinions without any actual concrete evidence of conspiracy. Beyond these, the UN Human Rights Council, the US, the EU, they've all consistently pressed Eritrea to implement reforms, release prisoners, cooperate with human rights mechanisms. Amnesty International has specifically named Mahmoud Sherifo and other G15 members as prisoners of conscience, really. And there have been sanctions, like the UN Security Council's arms embargo, though those were largely due to Eritrea's support for armed groups in Somalia and its occupation of parts of Djibouti at the time.
Okay, so despite this clear international consensus and pressure, what has been Eritrea's stance? How have they responded to these calls for change? Have they responded?
Eritrea's reaction has been characterized by consistent denial, unfulfilled promises, and this pervasive justification for its actions based on the unresolved border issue with Ethiopia. They cite that as a perpetual threat to national security, preventing them from implementing constitutional rights or respecting basic freedoms. It's the go-to excuse. President Afwerki himself has personally dismissed inquiries about prisoners like the G15 and journalists, sometimes claiming ignorance or outrageously calling them spies and dismissing reports as lies. Despite all the international calls, Eritrea continues to adamantly refuse access to its detention facilities, refuse to release prisoners, refuse to allow a free press, or end collective punishment. It also notably refuses to cooperate with UN Human Rights Council's special procedures or rapporteurs. It's effectively isolating itself from global scrutiny.
This has been such a powerful and honestly heartbreaking deep dive into Eritrea's journey from liberation to repression, seen so vividly through the lens of Mahmoud Sherifo's story. But there's another voice in our sources, a deeply personal one, that provides a really unique perspective. That of Mahmoud and Esther's son, Ibrahim. How does he personally grapple with this enduring injustice and hold on to hope?
Ibrahim Mahmoud Ahmed Sherifo's account is incredibly moving. It really offers a vital human dimension to this whole systemic tragedy. He was born the battlefields of Eritrea, He recalls a childhood marked by chaos, but also by the bravery and camaraderie of the freedom fighters, the Tegadelti. He later experienced what he called a normal childhood in post-independence Asmara, only for it to be brutally shattered by the 1998 war with Ethiopia, and then the subsequent domestic crackdown that consumed his parents. Ibrahim is absolutely convinced his parents' crime was simply calling for free and fair elections, and that the president reacted with these arbitrary, cruel, and excessive measures. What's striking is his unwavering conviction. He believes the president and his cohorts are the real prisoners in the court of conscience, and that his parents' ideals are roaming free within and beyond their cells. It's quite poetic, really. He dedicates his efforts now to advocating for a peaceful democratic transition in Eritrea, stating simply and profoundly that the day he sees his parents again will be the happiest day of his life.
That's a truly powerful reminder, isn't it? That even in the face of such profound defiance and suppression, the flame of justice and hope for a democratic future can persist through personal conviction and continued advocacy.
It really can. And this situation highlights a significant challenge, Holding isolated repressive regimes accountable to international human rights standards is incredibly difficult. It forces us to consider the long-term consequences, not just for individuals like Mahmoud Sherifo and his family, who paid the ultimate price for their principles, but for an entire generation shaped by a state that systematically denies fundamental freedoms. Even after fighting so hard for its own liberation, it's a stark, tragic paradox.
So for you, our listener, the question really remains. How do personal stories like Ibrahim's keep that flame of justice alive when official channels seem to fail so often? And what role can sustained international awareness and pressure truly play in ultimately shifting the landscape in Eritrea? Something to think about.